therapeutics, and devices. We also look at engineered product, and we look at straight tech as well.
Hi, I'm Steve Goodman from Mid-Atlantic Bio Angels. We meet in New York, although our membership come from pretty much all over the Northeast. We are geographically agnostic in terms of our opportunities. We're about 60 members. Not a fund. We invest as individuals. Over the last 5 years since our founding, we've made 6 investments, although we have 4 in due diligence now, at least 3 of which I think will get investment going forward. And our membership are entirely drawn from the pharma community in one aspect or another, either former C-suite people, buy-side analysts, serial entrepreneurs, but everyone has significant expertise in the space. And we focus on, we don't do healthcare IT, but we do diagnostics devices and therapeutics.
My name is Amit Kumar. I'm a member of the Band of Angels, which is a West Coast, Bay Area located angel network. We tend to invest locally. We have done some investments outside the area, but mostly in Northern California. We are a group of about 170 people. I believe the Band of Angels is the oldest angel network in the country. I certainly know it's the oldest on the West Coast. We tend to look at investments in all areas across the venture spectrum, all the way from technology to even retail. We probably do 20% of our deals in life sciences. We haven't done too many therapeutic deals recently for a number of reasons, but we look at all of those deals. We all invest as individuals as well. We tend to, our sweet spot is about $750 to $1 million, but we can invest up to $2 million.
And again, I'm Jeffrey Arnold. I'm a member of three local angel groups: Boston Harbor Angels, Sky Ventures, and MassMed Angels. The last 2 exclusively do life science deals. Boston Harbor Angels is a generalist group. We do about half life science and half technology or consumer. So why don't we cut right to the chase and ask the question, how does one get in the door with you guys? Omar, would you start?
Sure. Can you hear me okay now? Thanks, I'll speak loud and close here. So the first thing is to, obviously most of the angel groups use a software application to facilitate the pipeline process of applying. If you go to any of our websites in Texas, all of us use the same tool called Proceeder, linked to from our website, so that's how typically people apply. I want to encourage the entrepreneurs to remember we're not the NIH. We tend to believe the life science startups, the therapeutic startups on the science. We save the heavy diligence on the science until we're convinced that there's a compelling business model and opportunity for the investors. So if you tell us you've cured cancer, we nod and say, okay, you've cured cancer, and let's dig into your business model, and then later we'll dig into, if we like the compelling business model, then we bring out the heavy guns to dig into the science. I'm providing that piece of advice because typically we invest early stage. So usually the entrepreneurs who come to us have received non-dilutive cash prior to that from grants from various sources, nonprofits, whatever. So they're used to pitching the science, they're used to pitching the opportunity, and we're often the first business investors that they're talking to, first investors of any kind. So our big message to a lot of these companies is to switch the thinking, tell us about the science, but much more interestingly to us, tell us about the business opportunity, and we're prepared to get into the science in a much deeper way a little later once we're convinced that there's some interest in the business opportunity.
Rob, anything to add to that?
Let's next question.
Yeah. What's the best way to make sure that you're going to get a hearing?
Have a clear narrative, a very simple, straightforward story. If you have to be able to express what the technology is, what's the problem it solves, and how you're going to make a compelling business exercise out of that. All right. Nobody up here is investing in pure science or research. People are investing in companies that are going to make things or turn biologics or small molecules into businesses. And you got to connect whatever the science it is you have to a target market, and you got to show a very clear path how you're going to get there, and why that's going to be really interesting to somebody with a lot of money down the road who's going to buy it from you. All right, and if you can make that story fairly quickly and convincingly, you're going to get a good listening to.
Steve, what do people need to have in terms of team, proof of concept, data? How far along do they have to be in order to get an investment from you guys?
Well, I think there needs to be, the way I would put it is, there needs to be enough data available in the or in connection with the application that people can evaluate the thesis. So make some judgment about whether the science is off the wall or whether there's actually some validity to the prospect. And beyond that, I think I would echo what Bob and Omar have said, that it's really a question of being clear, not overselling the company. I mean, I think part of it is, you'll hear this over and over again about managing expectations. If you haven't achieved something, don't pretend that you have. You can talk about, giant markets, but let's talk about, more bite-sized kinds of milestones that you think you can realistically achieve with the money that you're going to get from us. Because if you stay focused on the big picture, the $10 billion market, it starts to sound a little bit like a pipe dream. It really requires very concrete, substantive answers to questions, and if there's something that you don't know, or there's something that you're unsure about, it's better to admit it and say, I'll get back to you, than it is, hopefully you've thought about it and you have some kind of an answer to the question, but if not, don't try to make it up, because once the due diligence starts, you'll be exposed and then your credibility is shot. So keep it simple, keep it clear, keep it substantive.
So I'd like you guys to think about a recent or current biotech investment and tell us what was particularly interesting to you about that investment. What got you excited about it? Who wants to go first? Go ahead.
Sure. This one is still in diligence, so I don't have a happy ending yet, but I think it's an instructive case. This is an unusual case where it's a company that's using a probiotic technology as a therapeutical solution. And part of what was appealing to us, and we're doing this in diligence now, is we're looking at a parallel go-to-market strategy where they can begin potentially using this formulation as a over-the-counter product under a different brand, while they in parallel pursue FDA funding. So no claims. The idea being that they could generate early revenues and offset the dilutive effect on the investors by being able to generate some early revenues. But we have a lot of skepticism about whether or not there's a path to do that without jeopardizing future FDA approval to become a proper prescribed therapeutic. So we're in the process of doing diligence on that now, but we thought it was a very interesting framework for proposing a therapeutic solution.
Anyone? Rob?
Yeah. We similarly are looking, this is one that's actively under syndication at the moment, in fact. It's a resorbable bone cement, which has a lot of applications in the body, but the path that the company's chosen as their initial is in maxillary surgery or dental implants. The characteristic of this substance is that it can be formed up, put in the mouth, it sets up very quickly, and it has enormous structural strength. All right, and then over time, over a 6 to 8 month period of time, the body repopulates it with its own cells, so the cement disappears and your body repopulates. For those of you that know that space, you know that to get a tooth implanted, you have to go in, they have to do a graft, you have to wait for that to heal, then they've got to do some other stuff, and you wait for that to heal. And so this potentially takes that process down to 1, maybe 2 appointments, as opposed to 3 or 4 over a year period of time. So the economics are very, very good. The science is actually quite simple. And the reason we like it is that this was spun out of a much larger company where a great deal of R&D was done on this over a period of 4 to 6 years by the founders, who were able to then license it away from the bigger company because it was a little bit off target for what the larger company was doing. But in effect, we look at this and said the investors are getting an enormous amount of IP and invested knowledge for what effectively would be regular startup terms.
Anyone else?
Sure. We have one of our portfolio companies that is on the website is called Forge Life Sciences. They are taking an approach similar to immuno-oncology, but in trying to create antivirals. They apparently, and I am not a scientist, so if I garble this, please forgive me, but within the cell there are proteins called sirtuins, and they are developing, they're developing small molecules that increase the vitality of the sirtuins and disrupt the replication of the virus within the cell. When they came to us, it was very early, and even though the company had actually already closed a Series A round, they wanted us in the deal. There was some hesitation. We put in a small amount of money because we felt we wanted to put a stake in the ground, and our faith has proven. We put in another couple $100,000 since then, and I think the driver there was partly the science, which was novel and interesting, and certainly there's a market need, but also the CEO of the company is a very experienced pharma executive who actually I think was instrumental in discovering the scientific thesis when she was in big pharma, and has now moved out and decided to pursue this full time, and she's a very impressive person. So
Thanks. So I'm going to open it up to the floor to see if there are any questions of the panelists at this point. Yeah.
So when you all do an investment, is there a clear lead who takes a board seat, is active, and somehow gets economic incentives to spend a lot of time on it, whether it's options or carry, or how does that work?
I mean, you want to take that one?
Sure. And let me talk a little bit about what the best way to approach us is, and I think it might be similar to these gentlemen as well. Our group consists of members that have all been interviewed to be allowed to be a member. You have to pay to be a member, and you have to be interviewed to be a member. One of the things that I've noticed is that you can submit your business plans on our website, or a better way to approach us, and this will get to your question in a second, is to find a member who you can convince that you have a great opportunity here. And not a champion, but we actually call them sponsors. So this is a member who's decided that he or she is going to invest in the company along with the rest of the group. The premise is that if one of our members who's been interviewed to be allowed to be in the group is willing to spend his or her time and money, then that deal has already moved up ahead of every other deal that has been submitted blindly to our website. Now, typically, that sponsor is going to be the deal lead. We don't always take board seats, not always offered either, and that's not that doesn't preclude an investment, but typically there is a deal lead in our situation, that if there is going to be a board seat, that person will be on the board. And even if they don't take a board seat, that deal lead often manages and follows that company and provides input to the rest of the group that invested in that company. In our process, every month we have a dinner where 3 companies present to the group, and it's a group of 150 or so multimillionaires who are paying money to be there and want to look at deals. So these are motivated investors. It's very rare to be in a situation where you can present to that larger group of motivated investors. And by the way, this is not I haven't verified this, but in all of the dinners that I've gone to, 2 out of the 3 presenters do a great job, and somehow one of the presenters always messes up. I don't know if that's a coincidence at all of the dinners I've been to, but typically if you're at a dinner, you're going to get funded, whether it's a couple $100,000 all the way to $1.5 million. So in our situation, if you get to the dinner, chances are good you're going to get funded, but getting to the dinner is very difficult. Having a sponsor is very valuable in doing that.
How do you find a sponsor?
You meet them at networking events like this. You meet them at parties. You meet them, wherever you network to them. And but it's hard. But it's almost like submitting a novel to a publisher. You can submit it and it'll sit there for a long time, or you can, if you have a relationship, that helps you get ahead of the pack.
I can see who's going to be surrounded.
I can give a slightly alternative model from this, which we have a more straightforward process, which we obviously network around very, very heavily in the Boston, the whole Northeast area, attend lots of pitch nights, lots of, all the universities around here. But we essentially, whether it's by referral to one of the members or application to our website, we have a very defined screening process. We have a separate screening meeting every month, and we bring companies in. It's expected to be a little bit more raw. And companies come into that screening meeting. If we like what they present, and it's a fairly concise format, we often send them away with homework for several months, right, to get everything sort of spiffed up and put in the right order. We then have, here, once a month, a main meeting where all our members come in, and we have 2 companies present, but we make a decision at that point to whether to go into due diligence or not. We actually vote companies into due diligence, and we do so with somebody acknowledging that they're going to be a deal champion, and we have 4 or 5 people assigned as due diligence team members. It's then up to that team to run the due diligence process, do as much of a deep dive as they need, and then come back to the group with a recommendation. In terms of syndicating, if we're one of the first groups and we believe that the deal's got good wheels, we will make a pitch to lead the syndication, and there are 3 or 4 larger groups in New England that sort of regularly syndicate together and then take them out. And if we lead the syndication, we will typically ask for the board seat. We will set, the terms are pretty standard in most of the deals that are done up here. We will ask for the board seat. It's not a deal killer, but we very much, over the years, we have learned that deals where we have board presence tend to do a lot better than deals where we don't have board presence.
Question over there.
Thanks. So for a lot of therapeutic projects, startups is a long time to exit and a high risk. And so especially for some rare disease companies, the feeling is that the business angels you might most like to reach are not a group in Boston or a group in the Bay Area, but it's business angels who might have a family connection to this condition, a sister, a child, a spouse who's dying from the condition. Is there a way to search for business angels who might be interested in disease X or disease Y especially?
I would say look at the disease foundations, the JDRF, most of the principal or the diseases that are out there, or even the rare diseases, they have not-for-profits that are set up, and those, they're charitable foundations, generally funding research, and I would look at the boards of those organizations.
If I can make a comment there, also, you have to remember these are business investments, and so if a member brings in a deal, and we've actually had this happen on one occasion, I was passionate about the deal because of the family connection, then there's obviously a bias there. So that's actually not probably the best way to get to business angels. If they're doing their job right, they're really agnostic about those kinds of factors, and they're trying to look at the business merits of the opportunity. And so philanthropic solutions, I think, are, to your point, probably the best place to get some of that early non-dilutive funding.
There was a couple of years ago at this conference, there was a guy going around who was particularly interested in muscular dystrophy, and he was talking to any company that had any kind of connection in that space. Now he had a lot of private capital, and I don't know whether he had friends, but he was looking for that. But that's kind of an unusual situation. I don't think that would impact, as Omar said, I don't think that would impact on the investment decision by the group as a whole.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you put in $1 million on starting work on a small molecule, that's not going to get you very far. How do you exit? There's a lot more money that's got to come in. So when you use up that $1 million, then what do you do?
Go ahead.
So we have our investment criteria listed on our website, And what we say is we're looking for companies where, in general, the pre-money valuation is under $10 million. But responsive to your question, we look for situations where there's likely to be some kind of a liquidity event within another, let's say, 20 million. So if you can get through a phase 1A, phase 1B, and you think there's a reasonable likelihood that at that point a big pharma will come in and want to license the drug or acquire the company, that would be something we would consider. If it's going to cost $40 million to get to that point, or if that isn't going to be enough, you're going to have to get through a phase 2, we probably would pass, because frankly, I don't know if others share this view, when VC size money gets involved, our interests tend to suffer. So
Yeah, I'm going to respond to this one. My last two biotech investments, the most recent one is a drug for traumatic brain injury and stroke. And the thing that was interesting about it is that there was a tremendous amount of non-dilutive financing available in traumatic brain injury right now. And so it looked like this drug was going to get financed all the way through perhaps a phase 2A trial, largely on grants, and the equity was going to pay for the stroke application. And so that took the financing risk out. And a prior one is Corbus Pharmaceuticals, now public, which was a drug that had been in man through a phase 2 trial. The original company that had it fell apart in the meltdown. They had spent $30 million on it, and it was being repurposed for an orphan indication. We invested $1 million. There was then a mezzanine of 4.5, and then it went public. So I look personally, and a lot of groups look for some way to overcome the financing risk of needing, $50 million to get something into a phase 2B trial, and hundreds of million dollars to take it beyond that.
Excuse me, but if you can't find, a special situation like that, and you're just gonna kind of find a normal path, I mean, after you make your investment, and you said you need another 20 million, for an exit, I mean, do you help get the next 20 million, or how does that work?
Yeah, financing risk is just like any other risk, technical risk, market risk, and so forth. So we evaluate that. Some companies are not ready, even though they may need 20 or 30 or 40 million over the life of their company, they're not ready for that at the first stage. So the $1 million gets them to a particular milestone, at which point we, as band members, we're all connected to the venture community and other investors. I come out of venture capital myself, and so I take after companies that I've invested in have achieved a certain level of critical mass, I help introduce them to larger investors who come in. Now you're right, Stephen, that sometimes a big institutional investor comes in and our interests get diluted. But in general, if the company is doing well, we're all doing well as well, and we like bringing in good, strong, smart capital.
So if I could put kind of an alternative view out there, I agree with everything my other panelists have said, but one thing we ask all of our entrepreneurs to do is to present us with an exit plan that has multiple identified exit points. Those are typically at the same point of inflection when they would bring in additional capital. And so we ask them, okay, if after you've completed preclinical studies, is there an exit there? Who would exit you and at what valuation? And if you decide to go ahead to phase 1, how much would you need to raise? And if you have successful phase 1 and you'd have to go to phase 2, how much would you need to raise? And we think there's multiple logical exit points that can occur there at lower, at a ratcheting valuation. So we ask that these companies think through that and give us this idea of a bifurcated fundraising plan with an early exit option, potential targets, and ideally these are companies they've spoken with. The other thing is and I'll put a pitch in here for a book written by a friend of mine, we recommend a lot of these entrepreneurs read a book called Early Exits by Basil Peters. Early Exits, and the author's Basil Peters, and he actually lays out a methodology for these entrepreneurs to kind of think through that, thinking about this idea of actually ensuring that the valuations are such that they never get out of whack with the logical acquisition price at where the company is in its life cycle. So that's one of the other things, because one of the surest ways to turn us off as investors is to come in and say, look, you're the first round of what we think are 6 rounds, and we think we're going to raise 50, 60 million. I mean, we can't even calculate the dilutive effect of all that future capital coming in, so we don't tend to be particularly excited about those companies.
But you help bring in the additional capital, right?
Yes, well, we have to believe in the exit model, and I'm describing our methodology. We have to believe in their exit plan, and not the Disney princess exit plan that one day my prince will come. You know, that's how these people are going to get exited. Who are the logical acquirers of this entity? When do they typically buy, and how do you know that? Have you spoken with those companies? It's amazing how many of these early stage entrepreneurs don't go talk to the M&A groups in the pharmas where they might actually get acquired. You talked about an early example of a company where we got very excited. There was one CEO who came in and was closing a round. He had completed phase 1, was trying to close out his round. He got oversubscribed because he actually conveyed to us the meetings he had in 4 separate pharma M&A groups. He still thinks he's 2 years away from exiting, but he's already talking to the potential acquiring entities and understanding what they're looking for, what their criteria are. We were so impressed that this CEO had done this groundwork that he was oversubscribed from our group. He had more money on the table than he was.
Yeah, but excuse me for a second. I think that those are very good comments, but I think your question, once the decision has been made to invest and we're investors, your question is, do we support the company and we help bring in the next round? There are very few companies that can get to an exit with $500,000 or $1 million, as you know, right? So yes, the answer is absolutely. We like to help our companies. Once we are ready, a company is ready to go look for more money, we will help either bring in more money from our group or syndicated groups if it's an appropriate amount. But if you need more money, we are all well connected to Silicon Valley venture capital as well as venture capitalists up here in the Boston area, and we will help those companies. We operate like a venture capital firm in that respect. We try and help support our companies.
But the venture firms never buy you out. You have to stick with it all the way.
Yes.
Well, it's the company's responsibility to develop its plan, which includes its development plan and financing plan. What we will do is we will help put you in front of the appropriate investors, and then it's up to the company to sell the
But
deal.
the venture won't buy out your interest.
They may,
They might.
yeah.
Unlikely.
That's very unusual.
Yes.
Why don't we move on?
Unlikely.
Yeah, why don't we move on?
I've always thought that angels weren't very useful in therapeutics because the upfront hurdles, following up with what this gentleman said. You know, you gentlemen are all talking about money like $1 million or so. And you can't do diddly for less than $5 or $6 million to get to a phase 1 study. Right now that's kind of where I am. I'm looking for $5 or $6 million, and I've been kind of directed away from angels because at an exit point, for instance, to be a bit extravagant on it, if you gave me $1 million, there'd be no exit point with that. I mean, toxicology work needed to go into a phase 1 study is significant. A phase 1 study in this area would be close to $2 million. So an animal study data that says your drug, the rat's tails move in the right direction and this or that isn't particularly exit valuable. You're sort of in a box where you need $6 million to do anything, which is, I've got a number of VCs that said, I'll fund you in the second stage when I need $18 million, okay? But I can't give you the $6 million in order to get to that point. And I wonder where angels might fit into a conundrum like that.
Based on the premise of $1 million, the answer is you're right. I would challenge the premise, okay? We don't look at deals where we think we or our small syndicate's just going to put $1 million in and then we're going to sort of sit there and go away. We will only invest where there's a clear capital plan. We know as well as anybody else it takes about $10 million to get to an IND for most of these applications, all right? we need to see, our rule typically is that we need to see somewhere between 50 and 70% of that provided by grants, okay? Which is either NIH grants, SBIRs, whatever, other source, non-dilutive foundation grants, things like that. So non-dilutive sources of financing, those need to be identified, all right? We plan that we stage our investments. We usually do an A round and a B round simply because we're not going to give you the B round until you get all the milestones that you plan for the A round. So there is a subsequent capital raise, but it's based on good news. That's just risk control. And then you have to have a very clear plan for what's going to happen when you get into the clinic. All right, and you know, we don't go in saying we're flying blind. Gee, we hope we get good PD results here in phase 1. You better have a very clear plan of how you're going to get to demonstrable positive PD results that are going to be transactable with pharmas. If we don't see that narrative up front, we're not going to invest at all.
I don't understand what you just said, to be honest with you. I've done numerous phase 1 studies, and for me to tell you ahead of time that this is going to be
the answer is
PD success, I'll tell you what the drugs in this area require. And it's not all that complicated. I mean, it's pretty darn straightforward. But I can't tell you what the PD outcome is likely to.
We have to have a strong feeling based on whatever the science is. All right, that the likelihood of getting a phase 1 study powered or a phase 1B study powered for PD results has a high likelihood of being successful. If we don't see that, you know, nobody else is going to see it either, which means the chances that some VC is going to come in and drop money on you down the road are just as slim as if we were doing it. I mean, you've got to have a good narrative, and the science has got to be intuitively obvious to the people who are investing. If it's not, you don't have an investable business proposition.
Well, I think he's saying that you can't predict ahead of time. You're saying, you know, you want to...
But that's the curse of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You have to
and
predict.
there are ways of knocking corners off the box.
But you need to make certain assumptions in order to be able to move forward. If you don't achieve success, if you can't even say there's a X% likelihood that we're going to be successful in running this particular protocol, then how can we trust you to make larger decisions? Right? I mean, you have to be able to do a complete plan. You have to be able to handicap it. You have to explain what your assumptions are, and then your assumptions are going to be tested in due diligence.
Yeah, but the reality is, I'm going to say something that is probably going to get my panelists a little upset. But the reality is, there are some deals that are not angel deals. Period.
Absolutely.
And most of the therapeutic deals are not angels deals. Okay, 90-some percent, and hopefully.
You guys look so optimistic.
No. Hopefully, the entrepreneur understands that. But when you're sitting on the entrepreneur side, you should talk to anyone who's going to listen, whether it's an angel or not, and or a venture capitalist or not. And hopefully, the angel or the angel group has a process in place that quickly says, oh, this is not a deal for us, and it does, the process doesn't waste everyone's time. But you're absolutely right. We've done very few therapeutic deals primarily for that reason, because...
But sometimes lightning strikes. Like there's one company that we invested in that had a bone therapeutic, and the early preclinical results were showing some very promising, let me say it was just very promising preclinical first stage results. But what we began to think of was, wait a minute, maybe there's an opportunity here to bifurcate the business. Why don't you pursue a veterinary solution for hip dysplasia in dogs? Because this is a market you could access in under 2 years. You don't have the same FDA hurdles and so on, while the rest of the company goes off and pursues the standard fundraising model for conventional activities. So as an angel group, we became very excited about that because, again, we're affiliated with the university with the largest veterinary school in the country. So we had access to the experts to begin to look and say, hey, actually bifurcating the business model here and pursuing a veterinary solution for what is a very large market within the veterinary space was interesting to us. So that's a deal, for example, where I think angels would have gotten, I think VCs would have said, look, that's a distraction for the management team. Veterinary use, I mean, they would have focused on a much larger human market. But we recognize that here's an opportunity to get some early revenues and help use that to offset and reduce the future capital requirements of the company.
Just
So
to
there's occasionally
complete
these
the,
things work out.
Just to complete the circle, if you don't mind, if I were to tell you that I had a drug, that we did an animal study there's no validated model yet for PTSD, and it came out positive in the innate characteristics of PTSD, not the sideline depression and anxiety, but the recall and the trauma dissipation, of recall dissipation, and it worked. Would that get you guys great?
I'm going to respond to that.
Yeah.
So first of all, I wanted to say something about the $1 million assumption. So we've all syndicated deals that have been $4 million. It takes multiple groups to do that. There are some groups around that'll do $1 million. So you need, there's some that'll do $500,000. You need 4 to 8 of them to get to $4 million. The problem is that if that's your first round with Angels, it's really hard to raise it because nobody wants to be the first guy in who's going to write a $500,000 check and then have to bring in all the rest. But if you get $1 million from Angels and reach some milestone, then your deal lead will help you by calling all these people who, I got their cards, I know them. Some of them I've known for years, others are new face, but hey, I got a great deal. Let me tell you why you should join in. And so you can get $4 million. The drug you've just described, I don't think gets there for us. And it would only get there if there were enough grant support that $4 million might get us somewhere. It sounds like that isn't the case. The other problem is that PTSD probably, you can't prove efficacy of this drug until a reasonably large phase 2B trial. And so the exit for your drug is probably a little bit too far away. If it was an orphan drug and you could, a tiny phase 2A trial could prove efficacy and you could get a big exit, that might be different.
And if you didn't have backing from the Department of Defense, it's unlikely that you'd get private money to fund
Department
this.
of Defense is a labyrinth.
It
But
may
if,
be, but
that's what you're going to need
they're
to
going to
do.
be your biggest
And the
customer.
grant money that's available on this cycle with which they're cycling through their SBI process and others, I mean, they rent up to quarterly grant issuance.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of.
Surprisingly, the DOD is more interested in funding physicians doing cooperative therapies in PTSD than new drug development. We struck out with the DOD.
There's
So
a
we get-
professor.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, there's Professor Rebecca Brackman at Columbia Medical School is working on an engineered form of ketamine to actually do preventive work in PTSD. And she is going to be almost entirely funded by the Department of Defense. Has nothing to do with social work. So, I mean, the money is there, the interest is there. So you just have to pursue it.
Yeah, so we got 5 more minutes. Any other questions? Well, no, then I've got a long list. So, what's the typical time frame and process for getting a deal done? Who wants to take that? Go ahead, Rob.
If you get a reasonably complete application into our screening process and a lot of the basic nuts and bolts of the company, in other words, the corporate form and the initial capital stack and everything are essentially in place, we can usually proceed in between 2 and 3 monthly cycles to get a deal done.
I would add one thing to that. I noticed, at least in Texas, across the 13 angel groups that I work with, there's a seasonality to investing. That deals don't get done from May to August, and they don't get done from Thanksgiving till mid-January. These are individual accredited investors. They have children and grandchildren. They take the summers off. They're investing their own personal capital, and they invest in you or a dry cleaner, and they go to Europe. I mean, it's a very different way of thinking than it is an institutional investor like a VC or something, where that's their job. They've got to fund. They got to move their money and get the fund properly deployed. So that's something to keep in mind as well. In our experience, it's about 2 or 3 months for a really promising deal, including the diligence time. But if you come and apply in June, it may not get traction until August anyway. So that adds a significant amount of time to the deal, but we would actually count the time we started the work, and it would be 3 months from when we all kind of.
By the way, I've never seen a VC make an investment in August either.
And I'd add that the 2 to 3 months is true for a group, but if you have to syndicate,
Yes.
then it's 2 to 3
46.
months, and then that group has to go syndicate to other groups. That's going to take another 2 to 3 months. So now you're talking 6 months to get an investment. And questions?
Well, yeah, Jeff, actually, one important point. Picking your lead angel group is important, all right, because there are people who are used to doing it, and there's others who just by virtue of where they are or how their membership works or the particular investing model that they use are not better suited to leading. But one of the advantages of getting one of the groups that's used to leading is that the groups all share due diligence with each other, all right, and that can compress the time frames for the subsequent groups, because if your group's due diligence is thoroughly done and respected by the other groups, they will often take it and you accelerate past screening meetings, you get into the main meetings right away, things like that.
Let's see. So how do you guys value prior and future grants in evaluating deals? I know, Rob, you wanted to talk about this one.
Yeah, I mean, there's two. We are actually looking at a deal where there's not so much grants. We're looking at a company that has IP that was millions and millions of dollars were spent in a prior corporate environment, and then the corp, because it was off target to what they were doing, it just happened to be some good stuff they found, they licensed it to the guys. And so there's an enormous amount of value. Now, where we are doing the pre-money on this thing, there's probably a 50 to 70% discount on all that existing corporate money. Pure grant money, there's going to be a huge haircut taken in terms of how the valuation. If somebody has $2 to $3 million worth of SBIRs that they've had over 2 or 3 years, which have been funding sort of post friends and family toward either the late seed round or the early A, you're not going to get a lot of credit for that. It's pretty much what you see is what you get up front. The hard dollar cash is going to drive the valuation.
That's for valuation, but don't you recognize that early?
Oh, in terms of the value of the story, there's no question.
Validation of the technology or validation?
Absolutely. We often will not, in the therapeutic area particularly, we will not do a deal unless we see grants, because we need those other sources of validation in the transaction.
I was just going to say that it also matters kind of when the company was founded. A company that's been around since, let's say, 2006 and has previously raised maybe $10 million and is still not at an IND point, we may think, well, how committed is this? How valid is the science? There's something wrong here. There needs to be an explanation as to why it's taking so long to move the science forward. Now, there can be good answers to that, but it's something to be sensitive about. The other thing, well, no, that's fine.
Okay, last question. Which one do we want to do? So how much importance do you put on the team versus the technology, and what are you looking for in team? Who wants to take that?
I don't think there's a simple answer to that, but it is, there's the old expression about bet on the jockey, not on the horse, or, better an excellent team with a mediocre plan than a mediocre team with an excellent plan. You've got to be convinced that management can execute. That's really what it boils down to.
Let me ask a quick follow-up, which is, so what would you do if you are a very young entrepreneur with not a lot of experience and you have a very young team? How would you overcome the team issues at that point?
I think I would start looking for a mentor, somebody who can, there are becoming more and more, I don't know, I'm coming from a New York perspective, and we're a relatively nascent biotech market, but in New York there are more and more training programs, opportunities for scientists to develop at least some basic business skills. But I think more to the point, it's important to affiliate yourself with someone who has a little gray hair, who has some experience, and who is willing to allow himself to be associated with the company in a way that is convincing that there will be some serious guidance available to this young entrepreneur, because no one wants to give money for educational purposes if people are learning on the fly.
Yeah, remember that the entrepreneurial model in biotech, and particularly in therapeutics, but which is what we're talking about today, but in biotech generally, has really been going for about 18, 20 years in really meaningful form. And at this point, I mean, all of these groups have a significant experience at it now. But there is also a large cadre of experienced managers, people who have taken firms, won with them, lost with them, all right, who are out there. And I would strongly encourage a young team with a great idea and some good technology, but that's not very long in the management experience level. Network around and find somebody who has run 2 or 3 biotechs. There are a lot of people around like that, particularly in the Boston area, okay? And figure out a way to get them in. These people have strong entrepreneurial skills. They have personal entrepreneurial tendencies, but they've been there, they've done it, they know the money-raising routine, they know how to talk to investors, they know how to make the hard decisions, they know what to do when it gets time to pivot the company, and believe me, you will pivot your company. All right? And find one of those people, because, you know, to follow into your answer, we don't bet the horse or the jockey, we bet both. Both of the stories have got to be very good, but where we see a team that's not very experienced, we send them away with homework and we say, we like some of the stuff you're interested in, but we think you need some more comprehensive management. And if they come back to us and they've made some right decisions, then we'll talk to them some more.
So, thank you all. It is time to wrap up. I'd like you to join me all in thanking the panel for their excellent morning, and thank you all for your wonderful questions.